Today we are recording the second video for morphology in our Introduction to Linguistics course, and we'll be working with compounds, morphological phenomena, and morphophonemics. So compounds are actually a combination of two standalone words, or if you remember from the last video, they're actually from free morphemes, right? So dry and clean are both free morphemes. They don't have to attach anything to have any meaning, but when they attach together, they become a compound word. Versus re-clean. Re plus clean is, re is not a standalone. It's a bound morpheme. It has to bind to something else. And clean is a standalone or a free morpheme. So re-clean is not a compound word, but dry clean is a compound word. Other examples are in front of, or greenhouse, or babysitter. Notice the different spellings too. So in front of actually has spaces in between. Greenhouse is one word put together, and babysitter has a hyphen. English has several different ways to represent it orthographically. So in a compound word, there's this thing called heading, and the head of the morpheme determines the part of speech of the compound, which in English, our morphemes are right-headed, which means that the word on the right of the compound is the head. So greenhouse, house is the head of this, and it's on the right, and it's a noun. So greenhouse is going to stay a noun, and it's going to be right-headed. In Tagalog, they actually have a left-headed language. So basag is a verb, and when you add the ulo, it's still a verb. It doesn't take on the part of speech of ulo. It takes on the part of speech of basag. So let's practice some English words. What are the parts of speech for the following English compounds? And remember, English is right-headed, so you're going to find the right word, the word on the right side, and that's going to decide what part of speech it's in, right? So airplane, homework, moon walked, music stand, world famous, fireman, old-fashioned, and silver lining. So if you guess these, you were correct. So airplane, plane is a noun, and airplane is a noun. Work in this situation is a noun, and homework is a noun. Walked is a verb, and moonwalked is also a verb. Now, stand is a noun, and music stand is also a noun. Famous is an adjective, so world famous is also an adjective. Man is a noun, and fireman is also a noun. Fashioned is an adjective, and old-fashioned is still an adjective. And then lining is a noun, and silver lining is still a noun. And notice how these are spelled differently too. Some are combined, some have hyphens, and some are separated. So we can draw trees for our compounds. So trees for compound words are built similarly to those for words with multiple morphemes. We did multiple morpheme trees in the last video, and in this video we are making compound trees. But see, the difference here is that this actually is a part of speech. So blue it has a part of speech above it, and bird has a part of speech above it. Neither of them are an affix. They both have their own parts of speech. And POS stands for parts of speech. And then the head is the right one, it's going to be bird. So, but compound tree words can actually be further compounded too. So bluebird can be compounded with the word house, and birdhouse can be compounded with the word blue. But the stress changes with those words. So think about if I say I have a blue birdhouse, even without the space in it, blue birdhouse, then that means that I have a birdhouse that is blue. But if I say I have a bluebird house, then that means I have a house that is for bluebirds, and they're different, and so their trees are going to look a little different too. See, this first one is a bluebird house, and the second one is a blue birdhouse. So compounds have derivation in them also. And they can fit right in the middle of the compound. So it almost looks like an affix here, but or an infix here, but it's actually not. It's an affix onto the original word, and then those two words. So ing is an affix onto the original word of swim, and then that word, swimming, is the new base, and that is a new word that gets added onto pool. So, but see how there's an ing right in here with the swim, but swimming becomes a whole new word. And you can tell by the heads of these little trees, right? Because swim has a V above it for verb, ing has an af in front of above it for affix, and then together they combine to make a verb, a verb. And a compound word, so would be, if you start at the N at the top, a noun, a compound word divides into two separate words. So it divides into a verb and a noun. The verb is swimming and the noun is pool. Every time you do a compound word tree, it's going to start with a part of speech at the top, and it's going to split into two different parts of speech. And what happens from there on out is can be crazy, right? So you can add affixes in there. So there are endocentric and exocentric compound words. So endocentric compound words are where the meaning of the compound is directly correlated to the meaning of each word. So dog food, for example, is actually food for dogs, right? But there are some that are exocentric. That's where the meaning of the compound is moved away from the direct correlation to each word. So moved away from the direct correlation to each word. So redneck does not mean a neck that is red, although it probably initially did mean that. They were talking about somebody who was out working in the field all the time and their neck got red. But right now it talks about a person. A person is a redneck. So there are a number of morphological phenomena that we should talk about. And we always try to apply things to English with this class and with this book because it's based on English linguistics with the English language, but we always have to pull in other languages also, which is great because that's how linguistics works, right? We look at several different languages to get patterns. So the first phenomenon to talk about is internal change. So sometimes, and English has a good example here, sometimes you actually just change the word itself internally, and you're not adding a morpheme or anything. So our irregular verbs do this quite a bit. So sing becomes sang in English. Another one is suppletion, and that one is where you completely change the word. It's just a whole new word. So English has a good example of that too, where go becomes went. There's no S anymore, there's no NG anymore like there was in sing. There's no G anymore, there's no O anymore. It's just a totally new word. It's went. And French, Spanish, German, and Russian actually have quite a bit of this going on, and your book talks about that a little bit. Another one is reduplication. English doesn't really do this regularly. The best example I can think of is when you're talking to small children, it changes the meaning. So like if you're talking to a child called Lou, a little one called Lou, and you call them Lulu, then that implies that they are small and cute, something like that. So if you talk to a very manly man called Lou and you started calling him Lulu, that would actually probably be very insulting to him, right? Because of the meaning that's surrounded by that. But that's probably our best English example. Otherwise, we don't really have a lot of reduplication. Turkish and Indonesian, there's some examples in the book that show reduplication for Turkish and Indonesian. The other one is tone placement, and obviously that goes with tonal languages, like Monobili from Congo, and that also has some good examples in your text. We'll also talk about some morphological level processes, some other ones. Cliticization is the next one. It's clitic plus the host, and in this situation in English, contractions are a very common example of that, where the apostrophe M actually came from the word am, but it's by itself, it's serving as apostrophe M, but it's working as an entire word, but it has to have the host in order to work. So the host is I and it becomes I'm. The next one is conversion, where it's a new part of speech. So perfect is an adjective, and you can have a perfect cake, but then if you didn't have a perfect cake, you could perfect the cake, which is a verb. And it started as an adjective and turned into a verb. Notice the stress is different in the two words, so perfect and perfect have different meanings. Another one is clipping. So like if you were taking a psychology class right now, instead of saying to your friends, I'm going to my psychology class, you might say, I'm going to my psych class. And another one is blends. And in English, a more recent blend is chill plus relax, turns into chillax. And back formation is another one that's actually a little bit harder to identify because you have to know the etymological history of the word. But in this situation, editor came first, and then it turned into edit. So it went from a noun to also having a verb attached to it. And then there's some other ones that are more common that you probably have heard of already. First are acronyms and initialisms. Oftentimes those are confused to both be called acronyms, but there's a difference. So acronyms are now like where the beginning letter of each of the words becomes a new word, and initialisms are where the beginning letter of each word is said. So National Aeronautics and Space Administration becomes NASA, so that's an acronym because NASA is a full new word. United States of America becomes USA and that's an initialism because that is not a whole new word. That is just saying the first letters of each of the words. The next one is onomatopoeia, which is when you try to make a word, when words are made to match the sound of something. So these are the sounds of dogs in English, Japanese, and Tagalog, and dogs don't actually bark in English, Japanese, and Tagalog differently, but when people are talking about them, they say them differently in English, Japanese, and Tagalog. So in each of the language, they show up a little bit different, but they have some elements that are similar. In the next one is word manufacturing or coinage, and then generic terms. So Teflon is a whole new word that was made up, and generic terms are like where Kleenex is a brand name, but oftentimes whenever somebody's reaching for any tissue at all, they'll call it a Kleenex. They'll say, can you please hand me some Kleenex? Even if it's not that brand. And then the last one is eponyms, and that's when it goes from a person's name to become a word. So James Watt became Watt. So we'll also talk about morphophonemics for a minute. So everything in linguistics, theoretical linguistics, starts to overlap somewhat. You'll remember that we couldn't do any phonology until we had done the phonetics. We needed to have the tools from phonetics to do the phonology. And morphophonemics is when you're using phonological processes to talk about morphemes. And so different allomorphs are in different phonetic environments, just like different phonemes were in different phonetic environments. An example is the plural morpheme of s, or s, z, and uz, and the past tense morpheme of t, d, and ud, or id, depends on how you pronounce it. The plural morpheme, these actually should say after, not before, but the plural morpheme s is after voiceless sounds, like in stops. And the z is after voiced sounds, like in dogs, and the uz is after sibilant sounds, like in buses. Sibilant sounds are like the white noise, s, sh, z, ch, zh type sounds. The past tense morpheme, the t is after voiceless sounds in past. The d is after voiced sounds in buzzed, and the id or ud, however you say it, is before or after alveolar stops, like in visited. So it comes after t or d in English. So, and then we'll see also that we'll look at some morphosyntax as well. And we did some morphology trees earlier that had compound words, and that kind of leads us towards syntax, where you're taking more than one word and putting them with a head in a tree. And in syntax, it'll actually be phrases, like noun phrase and verb phrase and things like that. So So they do overlap somewhat, and this is one example.